popular creators on YouTube have been saying for months about what they want from the Planet Zoo 2 game. Like most of them have complained about the existing pathing system and how they want it improved. Rudy Camel has talked about how he wants improvement to rope physiques, how climbable ropes can actually move like actual ropes, and Leaf has talked about a few very important points. But let's admit that everybody plays the game in their own way. So I play Planet Zoo in my unique way. And according to that, I have jotted down 10 points which would be very important for my kind of gameplay when Planet Zoo 2 launches. Okay, so we have a few more months left before the game releases. So hopefully my points reach the Frontier team and some of them can at least be implemented. If they are already implemented in the game, that is great for me. But in case some of them are not, and it is possible, then they might incorporate the same in the game. So jumping straight to point number 1, complexity meter for PC. Now Planet Zoo already has a complexity meter on console, but on PC we don't really have anything like that. Now why do I want this feature? Well, I have played Planet Zoo for more than 1900 hours over the last 6 years. During this time I've built some very large zoos, and one thing that has happened to me multiple times is that, say, I'll spend weeks building a zoo, get it to 80 to 90% finished, and then suddenly the performance starts falling apart. The game begins lagging, textures take longer to load, loading times become much longer, some textures get blurred, and sometimes zoo becomes so heavy that it simply isn't enjoyable to play anymore. In a few cases I had to abandon projects entirely. The problem is that there is currently no clear indication of how close we are to hitting your PC's practical limits. For example, imagine downloading a highly detailed habitat or building from the Frontier workshop, now previously the Steam workshop. If placing that blueprint suddenly adds a huge amount of complexity to your zoo, I would like to know that beforehand. A complexity meter would help me make smarter decisions about what to use and what to avoid. And this isn't because I'm playing on a weak hardware or something like that. My PC has a decent 10th generation i7 32GB Corsair engines, RAM, RTX 3060 12GB and NVMe SSDs. So, yet even with that setup, very large zoos can eventually become difficult to manage. A PC complexity meter would restrict players. It would simply give us information, and the more information we have, the better we can plan our zoos and avoid spending hundreds of hours on a project that later becomes too demanding to enjoy. The reality is that every PC has a limit. At some point, a zoo becomes too large, too detailed, or too populated, the performance starts dropping. The problem is that Planet Zoo doesn't really tell us when we are approaching that limit in the PC version. Complexity meter wouldn't stop anyone from building whatever they want. It would simply give players information. You could even make it optional and allow players to toggle it on or off. Those who don't want it can disable it. But players like me would find it extremely useful when planning large projects. So now moving on to point number 2, helicopter drop for animals in the wildlife reserves. As we already know, Planet Zoo 2 will have wildlife reserves where we can release animals that we have bred in our zoos and raise them in our zoos and into the wild. Please ignore the giant King Kong sized lions in the footage right now. Please ignore that. That's just AI generated footage doing AI generated things. Personally, I think this reserve should be much larger than the zoos themselves, so because they need to support naturally behaving populations of animals. And if that's the case, releasing every animal from a single location doesn't make sense. Let's take tigers for an example. Tigers are territorial animals. If one tiger has already established a territory in a particular area and I release another tiger right next to it, that could create immediate conflict. The same principle applies to many other species. That's why I would love to see a helicopter release system. The simplest version would allow players to select a location on the reserve, wildlife reserve map, and have a helicopter transport and release the animal there. Or even better version would be let the game's AI decide the best release location based on factors such as territory availability, population density, prey availability, or nearby predators. This would make the entire conservation and rewilding aspect feel much more realistic. And Frontier has already has experience with similar mechanics. Jurassic World Evolution 2, I think, used helicopters to transport and release dinosaurs. So the basic foundation already exists within the Frontiers game design experience. The helicopter animal releases would make wildlife reserves feel much more believable and immersive, and it's definitely one of the features I would love to see in Planet Zoo 2. Moving on to point number 3, edible animals. Now, don't misjudge the heading, please. Now, see, it's about like dynamic food chains and functional prey animals. That is what I wanted to say, actually. Now, if Planet Zoo 2 is really introducing wildlife reserves with self-sustaining ecosystems, then predators need to be able to hunt naturally. I have discussed this in another video. I'll leave a link to that video in the description. Frontier has already talked about living self-sustaining ecosystems, and if that's the direction they're taking, then food chains become an essential part of the experience. For example, in an Indian wildlife reserve, Bengal tiger should be able to hunt animals such as spotted deer, sambar deer, wild boar. Leopards could target smaller prey species like peacocks and monkeys, while in African reserves, lions should be able to hunt antelope, zebra, and other suitable prey animals. The important thing is that these prey species shouldn't be just decorative animals walking around the map. They should serve an actual ecological purpose. As predator populations increase, prey population may decrease. If prey populations recover, predator populations can expand as well. This creates a natural population balance that players have to manage. This could also add a whole new management layer to wildlife reserves. If one reserve becomes overpopulated with certain species, perhaps animals could be transferred to another reserve, brought into zoos, traded, or sold depending on the game mode. The idea isn't limited to land animals either. I think about large aquarium exhibits, aquarium species. If schools of sardines, mackerel, or small fish exist in the game, it would be great to see sharks and other predators naturally feeding on them from time to time. That would make the ecosystem feel alive rather than scripted. Though I'm not expecting any ocean conservation project, or I just expect wildlife reserves to be available for terrestrial animals for the time being, and that is great. I also think conservation-focused zoos could benefit from some form of hunting training system. Real-world reintroduction programs sometimes need to prepare predators for life in the wild, and it would be interesting if Planet Zoo 2 explored that concept in a simplified and ethical way before animals are released into the wildlife reserves. Overall, I don't just want predators and prey to exist in the same world. I want them to interact with each other and form functioning ecosystems. If Frontier is serious about wildlife reserves, this is one feature that could completely transform the gameplay experience. Now, moving to point number 4. Pre-built habitats for every species. Now, before I say anything else, please don't get me wrong. I still want complete freedom to build my own habitats from scratch. I want custom sizes, custom barriers, custom terrain, custom foliage, and everything else that makes Planet Zoo such a fantastic creative game. And I have immense respect for the creators who spend hours creating beautiful habitats, buildings, restaurants, and entire zoo complexes. The amount of creativity, skill, and patience some of those creators have is genuinely incredible. But then I am a little different. I'm an animal-focused player. What excites me most about Planet Zoo is observing the animals themselves. I love watching their behaviors, interactions, animations, social dynamics, and everything else that makes them feel alive. And that's exactly why I would love to see a pre-built habitat available for every species in Planet Zoo 2. Imagine the game launches with, say, 150 or 200 or even more animals. The first thing I want to do is explore those animals and see what Frontier has done with those animals. But there's a problem. Before I can properly observe an animal, I need to build a suitable habitat for it. The animal needs correct environment. If they're climbers, then proper climbing mechanism, enough enrichment, appropriate climbing structures, suitable plants, and everything else required for its welfare. Only then we start seeing its full range of natural behaviors. Now imagine doing that for 150 to 200 species. That would take an enormous amount of time. Instead, I would love if every species came with at least one official pre-built habitat designed specially for that animal. That way, when the game launches, I can simply place the habitat, release the animal, and immediately start observing its behavior. And the same thing applies for DLC releases. Whenever a new DLC arrives with 5, 6, or 7 new animals, there's always that excitement of wanting to see the new species as quickly as possible. But before I can do that, I usually need to build entirely new habitats from scratch. Species-specific pre-built habitats, I could instantly place the habitat, release the new animals, and start enjoying the content right away. There is another advantage as well. Official pre-built habitats are usually much lighter and better optimized than many highly detailed custom creations. That's not a criticism of workshop creators at all. Many of those habitats are absolutely stunning, but detailed builds naturally require more pieces and therefore more performance. Using optimized pre-built habitats would help players create larger zoos while keeping complexity under control. Here the complexity meter becomes very important once again, especially Planet Zoo 2 includes that complexity meter for PC. So for me, this feature isn't about replacing creativity. Players who love building should still have complete freedom to create whatever they want. I simply want an option that allows animal focused players like me to jump straight into observing and enjoying the animals, especially during launch weekend whenever new DLCs arrive. Point number 5 would be add every animal species on plant selection filter. I mean, this heading might confuse you a little. So it's like animal based plant filters. Now it might sound like a small feature, but I genuinely think it would make habitat building much easier for a lot of players. At the moment, when you're decorating a habitat with plants on Planet Zoo, you can filter plants by biome, continent, DLC pack, and a few other categories. Those filters are useful, but they don't always solve the actual problem. Let's say I'm building an orangutan habitat. I know the animal needs certain plants to be fully comfortable, but I don't necessarily know which plants those are. I'm not a botanist, and I'm sure many other players aren't either. So what usually happens is that I start placing plants that seem appropriate, only to discover later that some of them aren't ideal for that species. Then I have to remove plants, add different ones, check habitat suitability again, and repeat the process. What I would love to see in Planet Zoo 2 is a simple animal-based plant filter. For example, I'm building an orangutan habitat. I could select orangutan from the filter menu and instantly see all the plants that are compatible with that species. That would make habitat creation much faster and much more beginner friendly. It would also help players who care more about animal welfare than memorizing what plant species from around the world, And I think the idea could go even further. For mixed species habitat, imagine being able to select multiple animals at the same time. For example, I could select African elephant, plain zebra, and giraffe, and the game would automatically display only the plants that are suitable for all the 3 species. That would make creating mixed species habitat far easier than it is today. Most importantly, it would reduce the amount of trial and error involved in habitat building. Instead of constantly checking habitat suitability and searching through the Zoopedia, players could focus on creating beautiful habitats while knowing that the plants they're choosing are already compatible with animals. It's a simple quality of life feature, but I think it would save players a huge amount of time and frustration. Now, moving to point number 6, multiple habitat gates for larger habitats. Now, I know this is something that many Planet Zoo players have already discussed over the years, but it's still one of the most wanted features for Planet Zoo 2. In fact, for the way I play the game, this is probably more important than many of the building improvements people talk about. The problem is that Planet Zoo currently relies on a single habitat gate. When the habitat becomes extremely large, it can create a lot of operational issues. If a keeper enters through one gate and the animals happen to be on the opposite side of the habitat, it can take very long time for the staff to reach there. The same issue can affect feeding, cleaning, welfare checks, and even veterinary care. See, one primary habitat gate for the trade center dealings is fine, but secondary gates can actually help keep the larger habitats clean and the animals well fed and better taken care of. There is the wildlife sanctuaries now, so I don't have to make very large habitats anymore inside Planet Zoo 2, and wildlife sanctuaries will be having a self-sustaining ecosystem, so they would not need those kind of personal care for every animal. That is fine, but still for larger habitats within the zoo premises, few secondary gates on very large habitats will be a welcome move. Even say, for example, I'm training animals before I'm trying to release them into the wild. I have to teach them hunting and all. For teaching an animal how to hunt, I would need a larger habitat, and for those kind of habitats, a few additional gates would be wonderful. Now, moving to point number 7, jeep safaris and boat safaris for wildlife reserves only. Now, Frontier already has a lot of experience creating transport rides and guest attractions. Planet Zoo has trains, gondolas, cable cars, and several other transport systems. But personally, I don't think regular zoos need dozens of different ride types. I mean, what would I really What I would really love to see is wildlife reserve specific transportation. In Planet Zoo 2 introduces large wildlife reserves, guests need a realistic way to explore them and observe the animals. That's where jeep safaris and boat safaris come in. For jeep safaris, I imagine guests traveling through the reserve in safari vehicles would, while observing animals in large natural habitats, it would create a much more authentic wildlife experience than simply walking on guest paths. And for boat safaris, I simply think of placing, think of places like Sundarbans, Tiger Reserve. In a mangrove ecosystems like Sundarbans, boats are often the primary way visitors explore the landscape. Guests travel through narrow waterways surrounded by dense mangrove forests while looking for wildlife such as crocodiles, dolphins, birds, and if they're extremely lucky, they even get a glimpse of a Bengal tiger. That kind of experience would be incredible in Planet Zoo 2. My biggest request, however, is that Frontier redesign how safari routes work. In Planet Zoo, transport rides often feel like they're running on train tracks, while that works for trains, it doesn't feel right for safari vehicles. Instead of forcing jeeps into rail track like paths, I would love to see a dedicated safari route system. Players could draw simple dirt roads through the reserve, designate them as safari routes, and then allow vehicles to follow those paths naturally. Even a basic system with predefined routes would be a huge improvement, because I want those safari parks to be pre-built. I don't want custom built. If we have to build those safari parks from the scratch, then they would again, that complexity meter thing would again explode. My PCs would hang. The same principle could apply to boat safaris. Players could create waterways or use existing channels within the reserve and define navigation routes for your boat tours. Most importantly, these safaris would give guests a reason to visit the wildlife. After all, I have spent hours creating thriving ecosystems, managing predator populations, and releasing animals into the wild. We should also have a way for our guests to experience those reserves and appreciate the wildlife living within them, right? Photography and all, I'm not expecting in Planet Zoo 2 wildlife photography. I would put that on my list when I'm talking about Planet Zoo 3 5 or 6 years later. For me, jeep safaris and boat safaris are the perfect bridge between wildlife conservation gameplay and guest management. Now, moving on to point number 8, guided golf cart tours for zoos. Now, unlike my previous point, this feature is specially for traditional zoos rather than wildlife reserves. For wildlife reserves, I think jeep safaris and boat safaris make perfect sense. But inside a zoo, I don't really need safari vehicles, trains, gondolas, or a lot of different transportation systems. But I would love to see instead is a proper golf cart tour system. This is something that many real-world zoos already have, especially in larger facilities where visitors may not want to walk long distances. The idea is simple. Golf carts would use the same guest pathways that visitors already use. There will be no need for separate tracks or special transport routes. Perhaps the game could require a minimum path width before golf carts are allowed to operate. Once the path is wide enough, golf carts could travel along those paths while sharing space with guests. If visitors are blocking the way, the cart could simply slow down, honk, and continue once the path is clear. But what makes this feature really interesting is the educational side. Instead of functioning only as transportation, golf carts could be integrated with the existing tour guide system. Imagine a zoo tour guide. Imagine a guide taking a group of 10 or 12 guests around the zoo in a golf cart. The cart stops at key habitats, everyone gets down, the guide explains the animals, guests observe the animals, and then the group boards the cart again before moving to the next stop. This would make guided tours feel much more interactive and realistic. It would also be useful for larger zoos. Once a zoo grows beyond a certain size, guests often spend a lot of time simply walking between habitats. Golf cart tours could help visitors reach distant habitats more quickly while also improving their educational experience. Most importantly, it feels like a natural fit for a modern zoo. It's not a flashy attraction, but it's something I can easily imagine using in almost every zoo I build. For me, guided golf cart tours would be simple but highly immersive addition that would make Planet Zoo management and guest experience feel much more realistic. Moving on to point number 9, fully customizable exhibits. Now, I've already discussed this topic in much greater detail in one of my previous videos, so If you want my complete thoughts on the subject, I'll leave a link in the description. But in short, I think Planet Zoo 2 needs to completely rethink how exhibits work. One of my biggest issues with the current exhibit system is that every species is essentially placed inside a standardized box. Whether it's a small spider or a large snake, an iguana, or any other reptile, they all end up using variations of the same exhibit structure, and to me that feels limiting. What I would love to see in Planet Zoo 2 is a fully customizable exhibit system. Instead of fixed size exhibit boxes, players should be able to build proper terrariums, vivariums, aquariums, reptile houses, and insect displays in whatever size is appropriate for the species. A small tarantula doesn't need the same amount of space as a giant reptile. Likewise, a king cobra or a green anaconda should have access to a much larger and more complex habitat than a small exhibit animal. Giving players control over exhibit size, shape, and decoration would make these animals feel much more like real zoo inhabitants rather than objects placed inside a display case. And if Frontier is already moving towards customizable aviaries, which many players are expecting, then I think customizable exhibits are the natural next steps. I think the walk-in exhibits will be that system will become more customizable, and aviaries would use that same system eventually. In fact, I would stop calling them exhibits at this point. The kind of details Axolotl is having in the trailer, I think they would be treated as more proper animals and no more just discarded low resolution exhibits. That would they would essentially become miniature habitats designed specifically for reptiles, amphibians, fish, insects, and other small animals. For me, this would be one of the biggest improvements in Planet Zoo could make. And finally, my 10th and last wish for Planet Zoo 2: continued support for animal mods on PC. Now, this might not be important to everyone, but for me, it's one of the biggest long-term features that Planet Zoo 2 could have. One of the reasons Planet Zoo has remained so popular over the years is its incredibly talented modding community. Leaf is one of them. If you've ever visited Nexus Mods, you'll know that creators have produced hundreds of amazing animal mods. Some of them are species that were never added officially, while others bring entirely new experience to the game. These mods have helped keep Planet Zoo fresh for years. The reason I'm mentioning this is because the Planet Zoo 2 Steam page mentions de novo anti-tamper protection. Now, I am not an expert on DRM systems, so I don't know exactly how that will affect modding. It may not affect it at all, but I do hope that whatever protection systems are used, they don't unintentionally make animal modding impossible on PC. Personally, I've purchased every Planet Zoo DLC, usually very close to launch or on the launch date. So, from my perspective, modded animals and official DLC animals serve different purposes. Official DLCs professionally made content, new mechanics, support for the developers, and help fund future development. Mods, on the other hand, allow the community to experiment with a niche species and ideas that may never officially become content. Of course, Frontier has access to sales data that we don't. If they believe unrestricted modding would negatively impact the game's future, then they'll make the decision they think are best for the franchise. But if modding can coexist with official DLC support, I would absolutely love to see Planet Zoo 2 continue supporting the incredible creativity for the modding community, because the more animals, habitats, and experiences player can add to the game, the longer Planet Zoo 2 will remain active and relevant. And those are my 10 biggest wishes from Planet Zoo 2. Some of them may happen, some of them may never happen, and some of them might already be in development without me knowing. But these are the features that would genuinely improve the game for me and for the way I personally like to play Planet Zoo. If you agree with any of these points, let me know in the comments below, and if you have your own wishlist features, I'd love to hear those as well. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and more trailers, developer updates, gameplay details are revealed. I'll continue covering Planet Zoo 2 and sharing my thoughts on everything we learn about the game. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.